The evening rush at Bellini's restaurant was in full swing. The smell of garlic bread and pasta sauce filled the air as Maria Gonzalez hurried between tables. She balanced 3 heavy plates along her left arm, while her right hand steadied a large bowl of Caesar salad. Her black uniform shoes squeaked slightly against the polished floor as she made her way across the restaurant. "Here we go," Maria said with a warm smile as she set down the plates at table 7. "The chicken parmesan for you, sir. And the seafood linguine for the lady. Can I get you folks anything else right now?" The couple shook their heads, already picking up their forks. Maria nodded and turned away, tucking a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her ponytail was coming undone after 6 hours on her feet, but she still had 2 more hours to go on this shift. In the far corner of the restaurant, Maria's eyes drifted to her 8-year-old son, Elijah. He sat at a small table near the kitchen, his head bent over a notebook as he worked on his math homework. A half-eaten plate of spaghetti sat beside his schoolbooks. Maria felt that familiar pang of guilt watching him. This was the 3rd time this month she'd had to bring him to work when her usual babysitter canceled. "Your boy is so well behaved," said Gina, another waitress, as she passed by with a tray of drinks. "I wish my Tyler could sit still like that for 5 minutes, let alone an entire shift." Maria smiled gratefully. "He's a good kid. I just wish I didn't have to bring him here so often." "You're doing what you have to do," Gina replied, squeezing Maria's shoulder before heading off to deliver her drinks. Maria checked her watch. It was nearly 8 o'clock, which meant the restaurant's regular pianist would be starting his evening set soon. She glanced at Elijah again and noticed he had finished his homework and was now staring at the grand piano that stood in the center of the dining area. The instrument gleamed under the soft lighting, its polished black surface reflecting the hanging chandeliers above. As Maria delivered bread baskets to a newly seated family, she kept one eye on her son. The look on his face when he watched the piano was always the same, a mixture of longing and fascination that made her heart ache. Despite working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet, Maria had found a community center across town that offered free music lessons on Saturday mornings. She would take 3 buses to get Elijah there every weekend, often doing her laundry in a nearby laundromat while waiting for his hour-long lesson to finish. His teacher, Mrs. Chen, had pulled Maria aside just last Saturday. "Your son has something special," she had said in a hushed, serious tone. "The way he picks up music. I've been teaching for 27 years, and I don't say this lightly. He has a gift." Maria had nodded, proud but also worried. What good was a gift if you couldn't nurture it properly? A real piano was far beyond their means. The small keyboard she had found at a thrift store was barely adequate, with several keys that stuck or didn't work at all. "Order up for table 12, called Carlo, the head chef, his voice cutting through Maria's thoughts. She hurried to the kitchen pass-through window and picked up 2 steaming plates. As she turned, she nearly bumped into Mr. Vitelli, the restaurant owner, careful there. "Maria," he said, steadying her elbow. "Sorry, Mr. Vitelli," she replied quickly. The owner's eyes drifted to Elijah in the corner. "Babysitter trouble again?" Maria nodded, bracing herself for a reprimand. Instead, Mr. Vitelli sighed. "He's a good kid. Just make sure he stays out of the way of the servers, okay?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you," Maria said, relief washing over her. Mr. Vitelli was strict but fair. He'd bent the rules more than once to help her out, knowing her situation as a single mother. As Maria served table 12, she noticed a new group being seated in the far section of the restaurant. Even from a distance, she could tell these weren't regular customers. The men wore expensive suits, and one of them, a distinguished-looking older gentleman with silver hair, seemed vaguely familiar. Maria thought she might have seen his face in a magazine or newspaper. Gina appeared at her side. "That's my section, but Lucy's taking over, Mr. Vitelli's orders." "Who are they?" Maria asked quietly. "The guy with the gray hair?" "That's Alexander Harrington, the tech billionaire," Gina whispered. "Apparently he's having some kind of business meeting. Mr. Vitelli nearly had a heart attack when they walked in without a reservation." Maria nodded, impressed but distracted as the pianist finally arrived and took his seat at the grand piano. The gentle notes of a classical piece soon filled the restaurant, creating that perfect backdrop of elegant ambiance that Bellini's was known for. Maria watched as Elijah's face lit up. His fingers began tapping silently on the table in front of him, mimicking the pianist's movements. He'd been doing this for months now, teaching himself by observation. Mrs. Chen had been amazed at how much he'd picked up just by watching. The next hour passed in a blur of orders, plates, and tired smiles. By 9:30, the rush was finally slowing down. Maria's feet throbbed in her shoes, and she could feel the beginnings of a headache at her temples. As she refilled water glasses at a table near the kitchen, she noticed the pianist stand up and head toward the back, likely taking his usual mid-set break. Elijah was watching the now empty piano with such intensity that Maria could almost feel his yearning from across the room. Making a quick decision, she walked over to her son and knelt beside his chair. "How's it going, buddy?" she asked softly. "I'm okay," he replied, his eyes still on the piano. "Mom, did you hear how he played that last song? With the really fast part in the middle?" Maria smiled. "I did. It was beautiful." Elijah finally looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "I've been practicing that one on Mrs. Chen's piano. She showed me the hard part last week." Maria glanced around the restaurant. It was only half full now, with most of the remaining diners lingering over dessert and coffee. The pianist would be on his break for at least 10 more minutes. Mr. Vitelli was in the back office doing paperwork. "Do you want to try it?" Maria asked impulsively. Elijah's eyes widened. "On the real piano, but won't we get in trouble?" Maria bit her lip. "Maybe just for a minute," she said. "Just one quick song while Mr. Paolo is on his break. But if I say it's time to stop, you have to come right away. Promise?" Elijah nodded solemnly, already standing up. Maria took his hand and led him across the restaurant, her heart beating faster with each step. They reached the grand piano, and Maria quickly lifted Elijah onto the bench, which was too high for him to climb onto by himself. "Remember, just one quick song," she whispered, glancing nervously around the restaurant. Most of the customers were engaged in their own conversations, paying no attention to them. Elijah nodded again, his small hands hovering reverently above the keys. He took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the keys, and began to play. The melody of Claire de Lune floated through the restaurant, not the simple beginner version, but the actual piece. Elijah played slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. There were a few missed notes, a slight stumble in the rhythm here and there, but the essence of the piece remained. The sweet melancholy notes seemed to cast a spell over the nearby tables as conversations gradually quieted. Maria stood beside the piano, her throat tight with emotion. She'd heard him practice on the old keyboard at home, but this, the rich, resonant sound of a real grand piano, this was different. This was what his music was meant to sound like. She was so captivated by Elijah's playing that she didn't immediately notice the hush that had fallen over the restaurant. She didn't see Mr. Vitelli emerging from his office, a confused expression on his face, and she didn't notice the distinguished silver-haired gentleman at the corner table, who had stopped mid-conversation and was now watching her son with intense interest. It was only when Elijah hit a particularly difficult passage and slowed down, his small fingers stretching to reach the notes, that Maria became aware of the silence around them. She looked up and froze when she saw Mr. Vitelli striding toward them, his expression unreadable. "Elijah," she whispered urgently, "we need to stop now." But her son was lost in the music, his eyes half closed as he worked through the challenging section. A ripple of soft applause broke out from a nearby table, encouraging him. "Maria," Mr. Vitelli said as he reached them, his voice stern. "What is going on here?" Elijah's hands faltered on the keys as he finally became aware of the situation. The music stopped abruptly, leaving an awkward silence. Maria stepped protectively closer to her son. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Vitelli," she said quickly. "It's just that Elijah has been practicing this piece for months, and I thought, since the pianist was on break." Her voice trailed off as she realized how flimsy her excuse sounded. Elijah looked up at the restaurant owner, his eyes wide with worry. "I'm sorry, sir," he said in a small voice. "Please don't be mad at my mom. It was my fault." Mr. Vitelli opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a deep voice came from behind him. "Excuse me," said Alexander Harrington, who had approached the piano without anyone noticing. "I believe the boy was in the middle of something quite remarkable." The restaurant fell silent as Alexander Harrington stood beside the piano. He was tall with broad shoulders, dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent. His silver hair was neatly combed back, and his face, though lined with age, had a certain kindness to it that didn't match Maria's idea of a cold-hearted billionaire. Mr. Vitelli's expression shifted instantly from annoyance to something close to panic. "Mr. Harrington, I apologize for the disruption. We'll get our regular pianist back right away." Alexander raised his hand slightly. "No disruption at all," he said, his voice deep and measured. He turned to Elijah, who sat frozen on the bench, his small hands now resting in his lap. "Young man, that was Debussy's Clair de Lune, wasn't it?" Elijah nodded, his eyes wide. "Yes, sir," he whispered. "How old are you?" Alexander asked. "8, sir," Elijah replied, sitting up a little straighter. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "8," he repeated softly, almost to himself. Then, to everyone's surprise, he turned to Mr. Vitelli. "Would it be possible for the young man to finish his piece?" "I was quite enjoying it." Mr. Vitelli blinked rapidly. "Of course, Mr. Harrington, of course." He gave Maria a look that was difficult to read before stepping back. Maria placed a gentle hand on Elijah's shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can keep playing." Elijah looked up at her uncertainly, then at Alexander, who had taken a step back but remained watching with interest. After a moment's hesitation, Elijah turned back to the piano. He took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the keys, and began again from the beginning. The restaurant remained quiet as the beautiful melody filled the space once more. This time, Elijah played with more confidence even through the difficult middle section. Maria watched her son's face as he played. The intense concentration, the slight furrow of his brow, the way his expression softened during the gentler passages. She had seen him practice countless times on their broken keyboard at home, but never like this, never with such joy. From the corner of her eye, Maria noticed Alexander Harrington's expression. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely moved by the music. His eyes never left Elijah's small hands as they moved across the keys. When Elijah finished the piece, the restaurant erupted in applause. A warm flush spread across his cheeks as he looked up at his mother, with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. Maria squeezed his shoulder, fighting back tears. "That was wonderful, buddy," she whispered. Alexander stepped forward again. "Truly remarkable," he said, addressing Elijah directly.
"How long have you been playing the piano?"
Elijah glanced at his mother before answering. "About a year, sir. I take lessons at the community center on Saturdays." Alexander's eyebrows shot up again. "Only a year? That's—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Extraordinary." He turned to Maria. "You must be very proud." "I am," Maria said, placing her hand protectively on Elijah's back. "Very proud." Mr. Vitelli hovered nearby, clearly unsure whether to intervene. The regular pianist, Mr. Paolo, had returned from his break and was standing at the edge of the dining area, watching the scene unfold with curiosity. "I should probably get back to work," Maria said apologetically, suddenly remembering where she was. "Come on, Elijah." "Actually," Alexander said, "I'd love to hear him play one more piece, if that's all right." He looked at Mr. Vitelli. "With your permission, of course." Mr. Vitelli spread his hands in a gesture of compliance. "Whatever you wish, Mr. Harrington." Maria hesitated. Her tables needed attending to, but she couldn't bring herself to pull Elijah away from this moment, a moment he had dreamed of for so long. "Go ahead," Gina whispered, suddenly appearing at Maria's side. "I'll cover your tables for a few minutes." Maria gave her friend a grateful smile. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Alexander turned to Elijah again. "Do you know any other pieces?" he asked. Elijah nodded, his confidence growing slightly. "I know Mozart's Sonata in C major, but only the first part." "Perfect," Alexander said. "I'd love to hear it." As Elijah began to play again, Maria noticed Alexander's business associates at the corner table. They were watching with varying degrees of interest, some impressed, others clearly impatient to return to their meeting. One man checked his watch pointedly. Elijah's rendition of Mozart was less polished than the Debussy piece, but still impressive for his age and limited training. When he finished, there was more applause, though not quite as enthusiastic as before. The novelty was wearing off for the regular diners who were returning to their conversations. "Thank you," Alexander said sincerely. Then, to Maria's surprise, he asked, "Would you mind if I sat with him for a moment?" Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. I suppose that would be okay," she said slowly. Alexander smiled at Elijah. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space on the bench beside him. Elijah nodded and scooted over. Alexander sat down, his large frame dwarfing the boy on the piano bench. He placed his hands on the keys and played a quick scale. "It's been a while since I've done this," he said with a self-deprecating smile. Then he began to play. The piece was something classical that Maria didn't recognize, but it was beautiful, complex, and emotional. Alexander played with the skill of someone who had studied for many years, though perhaps was a bit rusty. His large hands moved confidently across the keys, occasionally missing a note but never losing the flow of the music. Elijah watched, transfixed, his eyes darting between Alexander's hands and his face. The restaurant grew quiet again as everyone listened to the unexpected performance from the billionaire. When Alexander finished, he turned to Elijah.
"Now," he said quietly, "why don't we try something together?"
"Do you know Heart and Soul? It's a simple duet." Elijah nodded eagerly. "Mrs. Chen taught me that one first." "Excellent. You take the melody, I'll handle the accompaniment." Together, the unlikely pair began to play the familiar tune, Elijah picking out the simple melody with concentration, Alexander providing the chordal accompaniment with ease. It was a much lighter piece than what they had played before, and several diners smiled at the recognizable song. Maria watched, a lump forming in her throat. She had never seen Elijah like this, so comfortable, so in his element. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what life might be like if they could afford a real piano, proper lessons, maybe even a school where his talent could be nurtured. The duet ended, and Alexander gave Elijah an approving nod. "You have a gift, young man," he said. A rare gift. Elijah beamed at the praise. "Thank you, sir." Alexander stood up from the bench, straightening his suit jacket. "I should get back to my associates," he said. Then to Maria, "Might I have a word with you?" Privately, Maria felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. What could this billionaire possibly want to say to her? Was he going to complain to Mr. Vitelli? Had she broken some unwritten rule by letting Elijah play? "Of course," she managed to say. She turned to Elijah. "Go back to our table, buddy. I'll be right there." Elijah hopped down from the bench, gave Alexander a shy smile, and walked back to his corner table. The restaurant had mostly returned to normal now, the brief musical interlude already becoming just an interesting story for the diners to share later. Alexander led Maria to a quiet spot near the entrance, away from his table of associates and the curious eyes of other customers. "Your son has remarkable talent," he said without preamble. "Thank you," Maria replied, unsure where this was heading. "How old did you say he is?" 8, Maria nodded. "Yes, he'll be 9 in November." Alexander seemed to be considering something, his blue eyes thoughtful. "And he's only been playing for a year? At the community center?" "That's right. Every Saturday morning. His teacher, Mrs. Chen, she says he picks things up faster than any student she's ever had." "I believe it," Alexander said. He paused as if carefully choosing his next words. "Mrs. Gonzalez," Maria supplied. "Maria Gonzalez. Mrs. Gonzalez, I don't mean to pry, but does Elijah have access to a piano at home?" Maria felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "We have a keyboard. It's not in the best shape, but it works mostly." Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable. "I see. And these lessons at the community center, how frequently does he attend?" "Once a week. For an hour. It's all they offer for free," Maria explained, feeling increasingly self-conscious about their circumstances. "Once a week," Alexander repeated thoughtfully. "Mrs. Gonzalez, I run a foundation, the Harrington Youth Initiative. We provide educational opportunities for gifted children who might not otherwise have access to the resources they need to develop their talents." Maria's breath caught in her throat. That's wonderful," she said cautiously. "I believe your son would be an excellent candidate for our music program," Alexander continued. "Full scholarship to the Lakeside Academy of Music plus a proper instrument for your home." Maria stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Alexander smiled slightly. "The Lakeside Academy. It's one of the finest music schools in the city. Private lessons twice a week, ensemble opportunities, recitals, everything a young musician needs." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "Mr. Harrington, that's incredibly generous, but we couldn't possibly accept—" "Please," he interrupted gently. This isn't charity, Mrs. Gonzalez. This is investment in talent. Talent that deserves to be nurtured. Maria stood frozen, her mind racing to process Alexander Harrington's words. A full scholarship? A proper piano? This had to be some kind of joke. Mr. Harrington, she began carefully. I appreciate what you're saying, but... She paused, searching for the right words. We're strangers to you. Why would you offer something so generous to my son? Alexander's expression softened. Mrs. Gonzalez, do you know how I made my fortune? Maria shook her head. She had only a vague idea that he owned some big tech company. I built a software company from nothing. Started in my garage 30 years ago, Alexander explained. But before that, I was a music student. Piano was my first love. He glanced over at Elijah, who was watching them curiously from his table. I was headed to Juilliard at 18. What happened? Maria asked. A shadow crossed Alexander's face. Life happened. My father died suddenly. Heart attack. My mother was alone with 3 younger siblings for me to help support. I had to choose, music or responsibility. He shrugged. I chose responsibility. Maria nodded slowly, beginning to understand. I built my company, made more money than I could ever spend, Alexander continued. But I've always wondered what might have been if someone had stepped in back then, if there had been a way for me to pursue both paths. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. My foundation has helped dozens of children over the years, mostly in STEM fields, but music was always part of the mission statement. Your son... He paused, looking again at Elijah. He has something special, the kind of gift that shouldn't be left to weekly lessons and a broken keyboard. Maria took the card with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Alexander replied. Call the number on Monday. My assistant will arrange everything. Maria stared at the card, heavy cream-colored cardstock with elegant embossed lettering. This is so much to take in. I understand, Alexander said. Take the weekend to consider. But please know, Mrs. Gonzalez, this offer comes with no strings attached. This is about your son's talent, nothing more. Maria looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. All she saw was sincerity and something else. Sadness, perhaps, or regret. Thank you, she said finally. I will call on Monday. Alexander nodded, seemingly satisfied. Excellent. Now I should return to my meeting. He extended his hand to shake hers. His grip was firm but gentle. It was a pleasure meeting you and Elijah. As Alexander walked back to his table, Maria stood rooted to the spot, the business card clutched in her hand. She watched as he rejoined his associates, seamlessly picking up whatever business discussion they'd been having before the impromptu piano performance. Everything okay? Gina asked, appearing at Maria's side with a tray of dirty dishes. I think so, Maria replied, still dazed. He wants to give Elijah a music scholarship. To the Lakeside Academy. Gina nearly dropped her tray. The Lakeside Academy? Are you serious? That place costs a fortune. Maria nodded, tucking the card safely into her apron pocket. He says it would be a full scholarship. Through his foundation. Well, I'll be... Gina breathed. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Maria returned to work, moving through the restaurant on autopilot as she served her remaining tables. Her mind was elsewhere, turning over Alexander's offer again and again. It seemed too good to be true. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. A single mother working 2 jobs, barely keeping her head above water. She glanced at Elijah, who had returned to his homework, seemingly unaware that his life might be about to change dramatically. What would this mean for him, for them? Private music lessons, a real piano? It was everything she had wished she could give him but never thought possible. By the time Alexander's party finished their meal and prepared to leave, Maria had convinced herself that nothing would come of it. Wealthy people made grand gestures all the time in the heat of the moment, only to forget them later. She wouldn't get her hopes up and certainly wouldn't get Elijah's hopes up. To her surprise, as Alexander was putting on his coat, he stopped by their corner table. Maria was wiping down a nearby surface and watched as he crouched down to Elijah's eye level. Thank you for the music tonight, Alexander said. You play beautifully. Elijah looked up from his book, his expression shy but pleased. Thank you for playing with me, sir. Alexander smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. It was my pleasure. Perhaps we'll play together again sometime. He straightened up, nodded to Maria, and left with his group of associates. Who was that man, Mom? Elijah asked once they were gone. Maria sat down across from her son, unsure how much to tell him. His name is Mr. Harrington. He liked your playing very much. He plays really well too, Elijah said matter-of-factly, but he made some mistakes in the Mozart piece. His left hand was too heavy on the accompaniment. Maria couldn't help but laugh. Trust Elijah to critique a billionaire's piano technique. Well, he said he hasn't played in a while. Elijah shrugged. He was still good. He returned to his book, the encounter already fading in importance to him. Maria wished she could be so nonchalant. Her hand kept returning to her apron pocket, feeling the outline of the business card there. What if this was real? What if Alexander Harrington actually meant what he said? Time to close up, Mr. Vitelli called out as the last customers paid their bills and left. Maria helped with the closing duties, refilling salt and pepper shakers, wiping down tables, restocking napkins for the next day. All the while her mind was elsewhere. So, Mr. Vitelli said as he approached her near the end of her shift, "You've been holding out on me, Maria. You never told me your boy was a piano prodigy." Maria smiled tiredly. "I didn't know he was, to be honest. I knew he loved it, but tonight," she trailed off, remembering how confident Elijah had looked sitting at that grand piano. "Well, he's got talent, that's for sure," Mr. Vitelli said. He hesitated, then added, "I saw you talking with Mr. Harrington. Everything okay?" "Yes," Maria replied. "He was very kind about Elijah's playing." Mr. Vitelli studied her for a moment. "You know, if you ever need the piano for the boy to practice on, he can come in before opening hours. Just let me know." Maria felt a lump form in her throat at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Vitelli, that means a lot." "Don't mention it," he said gruffly, already turning away. "See you tomorrow night." By the time Maria and Elijah left the restaurant, it was nearly midnight. The city streets were quieter now, though never truly silent. Elijah yawned as they waited for the bus, leaning against his mother's side. "Did you have fun tonight?" Maria asked, stroking his hair. "Mm-hmm," he mumbled sleepily. "The piano was so nice, Mom. It felt different from Mrs. Chen's piano. The keys were, I don't know, they just felt right." "I'm glad, honey," Maria said softly. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. Elijah fell asleep against her shoulder, and Maria stared out the window at the passing city lights, her mind still spinning with the evening's events. The weight of the business card in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. Their apartment was small, just one bedroom that Maria gave to Elijah, while she slept on the pull-out couch in the living room. It wasn't much, but she'd worked hard to make it a home. Cheerful curtains, a bookshelf full of library books, plants on the windowsill. She carried a half-asleep Elijah to his bed, helped him change into pajamas, and tucked him in. "Night, Mom," he murmured as he drifted off again. "Good night, my little musician," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Back in the living room, Maria finally took out Alexander Harrington's business card and studied it under the lamp. "Harrington Youth Initiative," it read, with a phone number and email address below. Simple, elegant, understated wealth. She set the card on the coffee table and pulled out the sofa bed, going through her nightly routine mechanically. As she lay in the darkness staring at the ceiling, doubt crept in. What if this was some kind of cruel joke? What if she called on Monday and no one knew what she was talking about? Or worse, what if it was real, but came with hidden expectations? Rich people didn't just give things away without wanting something in return, did they? But there had been something genuine in Alexander Harrington's eyes when he spoke about his own lost opportunity in music. Something that made Maria want to trust him despite her natural skepticism. She turned onto her side, her mind racing between hope and doubt. Whatever happened, she decided, she wouldn't tell Elijah about any of this until she knew for sure. She couldn't bear to see his face light up with hope only to have it crushed if nothing came of Alexander's offer. Tomorrow was Sunday. She had the morning shift at her second job, the diner 6 blocks away, and then the whole afternoon free. She and Elijah usually spent Sunday afternoons at the public library, where he could read music books and she could rest her feet for a few hours. Monday seemed both too far away and too close, as Maria finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The image of her son's hands on the keys of that beautiful grand piano following her into her dreams. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky and light drizzle. Maria stood at the bus stop, huddled under her worn umbrella, watching Elijah board the school bus. He waved from the window and she waved back, forcing a smile despite her exhaustion. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with them. The business card sat in her wallet, already beginning to bend at the corners from how many times she had taken it out, looked at it, and put it back. The phone number seemed to taunt her. One call could change everything, or confirm her suspicions that it had all been too good to be true. Just make the call, she muttered to herself as the school bus pulled away. The worst they can say is no. But that wasn't true, was it? The worst would be getting Elijah's hopes up, having him believe that his dream was finally within reach only to have it yanked away. That would be far worse than never calling at all. Maria checked her watch. It was just after 8. Too early to call? Probably not. Business people started their days early, didn't they? She pulled out her cell phone, an older model with a cracked screen that she kept promising herself she would replace when money wasn't so tight. Her finger hovered over the keypad. With a deep breath, she dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a crisp, professional voice answered. Harrington Youth Initiative, this is Lisa. How may I help you? Maria's throat suddenly felt dry. Hello. My name is Maria Gonzalez. Mr. Harrington gave me this number on Saturday. He said to call about a music scholarship for my son. There was a brief pause and Maria's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought. The confusion, the polite dismissal. Mrs. Gonzalez, yes, Lisa said, her tone warming considerably. Mr. Harrington mentioned you would be calling. We've been expecting your call. Maria nearly dropped her phone. You have? Yes, of course. Mr. Harrington was quite impressed with your son's piano playing. Elijah, correct? That's right, Maria said faintly, still trying to process that this was actually happening. Wonderful. Mr. Harrington has already spoken with the director at Lakeside Academy, and they're very excited about meeting Elijah. Would you be available to come in for a tour this afternoon? Perhaps around 4 o'clock? Maria's mind raced. Her shift at the diner ended at 3. She could pick up Elijah from after-school care and make it to Lakeside by 4 if they hurried. Yes, she said. Yes, 4 would work. Perfect. I'll email you the details and address. May I have your email? Maria provided her email address, still feeling as though she were in some kind of dream. One more thing, Lisa continued. Mr. Harrington asked me to arrange for a piano to be delivered to your home. Would tomorrow be convenient for delivery? Maria sat down heavily on the bus stop bench, her legs suddenly weak. A piano, she echoed. To our apartment? Yes, an upright Yamaha. Nothing too large, but excellent quality for a developing musician. Mr. Harrington was quite specific about the model. Maria stammered. Our apartment is very small. I'm not sure if the delivery team can assess the space, Lisa assured her. If the standard upright won't fit, we can arrange for a smaller model. Mr. Harrington wants to ensure Elijah has a proper instrument to practice on. Maria closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing heart. This was real. This was actually happening. Mrs. Gonzalez, are you still there? Lisa asked. Yes, sorry, Maria said quickly. Tomorrow would be fine for the delivery. After 3, if possible, of course. I'll arrange it. And we'll see you and Elijah at Lakeside Academy at 4 today. The director, Dr. Rivera, will meet you personally. After ending the call, Maria sat on the bench for several minutes, staring at her phone. Rain pattered gently on her umbrella, but she barely noticed. A piano. A real piano in their tiny apartment, and a meeting at one of the most prestigious music schools in the city. She needed to tell Elijah. But how? How could she explain this miracle without it sounding completely unbelievable? The workday passed in a blur. Maria moved through her tasks at the diner mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She spilled coffee on a customer's newspaper and forgot an entire order. Mistakes she never made. Her manager, noticing her distraction, asked if everything was all right. Yes, Maria said. Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. She couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. My son might be getting a special opportunity. A music scholarship. That's wonderful, her manager exclaimed. The one who plays piano, right? You're always talking about his lessons. Maria nodded. A customer at Bellini's heard him play on Saturday. Turns out he runs some foundation for gifted kids. Well, good for him. And good for you. You deserve a break. At 3 o'clock, Maria hung up her apron and hurried to pick up Elijah from the after-school program. Her son was sitting at a table bent over a sheet of paper, drawing what looked like a piano keyboard. Hey, buddy, she said, trying to keep her voice casual. Ready to go? Elijah looked up and smiled. Hi, Mom. Look, I'm designing my own piano. If the keys were arranged in circles instead of straight lines, you could reach more notes at once. Maria looked at the drawing, a spiral of black and white keys. That's really creative, she said. Listen, we need to make a little stop before going home today. Where are we going? Elijah asked as he packed up his things. Maria took a deep breath. Remember the man from the restaurant? The one who played piano with you? Elijah nodded. Mr. Harrington. Right. Well, he runs a music school and he thought you played so well that he wants to meet with us there. Today. Elijah's eyes widened. A music school? Like a real music school with lots of pianos? Yes, a real music school, Maria said, watching his reaction carefully. It's called Lakeside Academy. Have you heard of it? Elijah's mouth dropped open. Lakeside? Mom, that's where Joshua Wong goes. He won the junior piano competition last year. Mrs. Chen told us about him. Maria hadn't realized Elijah knew about Lakeside's reputation. So, you'd like to go see it? Yes, Elijah exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. Can we go now? We're heading there right now, Maria said, laughing at his enthusiasm. But Elijah, I don't want you to get too excited yet. This is just a meeting. We're just going to talk and look around. Elijah nodded, but his eyes were shining with excitement. Okay, Mom, just a meeting. They caught the bus across town, transferring once to reach the upscale neighborhood where Lakeside Academy was located. The rain had stopped, and late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds as they walked the final 2 blocks. Lakeside Academy was housed in a beautiful old brick building with large windows and ivy climbing the walls. A small sign beside the entrance confirmed they were in the right place. Maria smoothed down Elijah's hair and straightened her own clothes, suddenly conscious of how worn they looked compared to the elegant surroundings. Remember your manners, she reminded Elijah as they approached the door. And whatever happens, I'm already so proud of you. Elijah squeezed her hand. I know, Mom. The interior of the academy was even more impressive. Polished wood floors, framed photographs of students performing on stages around the world, and the sound of music coming from behind closed doors. A woman at the reception desk looked up as they entered. May I help you? She asked with a warm smile. I'm Maria Gonzalez. We have a 4 o'clock appointment with Dr. Rivera. Recognition flashed in the woman's eyes. Of course, Mrs. Gonzalez, and this must be Elijah. She stood and extended her hand to the boy. I'm Ms. Chen, Dr. Rivera's assistant. Elijah shook her hand politely. Nice to meet you. Dr. Rivera is looking forward to meeting you both, Ms. Chen said. He's just finishing up with another student. Would you like a tour while you wait? Yes, please, Maria said. Ms. Chen led them down a hallway pointing out practice rooms, each containing either a piano or other instruments. We have 20 individual practice rooms, she explained. Students can reserve them anytime between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Elijah stared wide-eyed into each room as they passed. Through one door, they saw a teenage girl playing a violin, her eyes closed in concentration. Through another, a boy not much older than Elijah was practicing scales on a cello. And this is our main performance hall, Ms. Chen said, opening a set of double doors. The room took Maria's breath away. A small auditorium with perhaps 100 seats faced a stage where a magnificent grand piano stood. The late afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting the whole space in golden light. We hold student recitals here monthly, Ms. Chen explained, and master classes with visiting artists. Elijah tugged on Maria's sleeve. Mom, he whispered, his voice full of awe. Look at that piano. Before Maria could respond, a door at the side of the hall opened and a tall man with salt and pepper hair and glasses entered. Mrs. Gonzalez, I'm Dr. Rivera, the director of Lakeside Academy. He approached with an extended hand. And you must be Elijah. I've heard wonderful things about your playing. Maria shook his hand, noticing his kind eyes and gentle manner. Thank you for meeting with us, Dr. Rivera. The pleasure is mine, he replied. Then to Elijah, I understand you played Debussy for Mr. Harrington on Saturday night. That's quite advanced for someone your age. Elijah nodded shyly. I like Debussy. The chords sound like colors. Dr. Rivera's eyebrows rose. That's a very insightful observation, young man. He gestured to the piano on the stage. Would you like to play something for me? Elijah looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead," she said. "It's okay." Elijah walked slowly to the stage and climbed the steps. He approached the piano with the same reverence he had shown at Bellini's, sitting carefully on the bench and placing his hands on the keys. After a moment of hesitation, he began to play, not Debussy this time, but a Bach minuet that Mrs. Chen had taught him. His small fingers moved confidently over the keys, finding the complex patterns of the piece with surprising accuracy. Maria watched Dr. Rivera's face as he listened. The director's expression changed from polite interest to genuine surprise, and finally to something like excitement. He caught Maria's eye and gave her a small nod that made her heart soar. This was real. This was happening. And judging by the look on Dr. Rivera's face, Elijah had just passed his first test with flying colors. 6 months had passed since that rainy Monday when Maria and Elijah first stepped into Lakeside Academy. Now, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Maria stood at the back of Bellini's restaurant watching her son prepare for his performance. The restaurant had been transformed. The regular dining tables had been rearranged to create a small performance space. The grand piano, polished to a high shine, stood at the center. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and nearly every seat was filled with eager guests. Regular customers, music students, teachers from Lakeside, and several families whose children would also be performing today. "Nervous?" Mr. Vitelli asked, appearing at Maria's side with 2 glasses of water. Maria accepted a glass gratefully. "A little," she admitted. "Though probably more than Elijah is," Mr. Vitelli chuckled. That boy was born to perform. He looked around at his restaurant with pride. 6 months ago, who would have thought we'd be hosting monthly music recitals? The last Sunday of every month, booked solid weeks in advance. "It's amazing," Maria agreed. The Harrington Youth Music Initiative has really taken off. What had begun as Alexander Harrington's impulse to help one talented child had grown into something much larger. After Elijah's successful audition at Lakeside, Alexander had expanded his foundation's music program, identifying and supporting other gifted children throughout the city. Today's recital would feature 5 young musicians, including Elijah. "Is Mr. Harrington coming today?" Mr. Vitelli asked, scanning the crowd. Maria nodded. "He never misses Elijah's performances." She spotted Alexander near the back of the room, dressed casually in a sweater rather than his usual business suit. He caught her eye and raised his hand in a small wave. Maria waved back, still amazed at how much their lives had changed because of this man's kindness. The changes had been swift and dramatic. The day after their visit to Lakeside, a beautiful upright Yamaha piano had been delivered to their apartment. The delivery men had needed to remove the door to get it inside, and it took up nearly an entire wall of their small living room. But Elijah had been beside himself with joy. 2 weeks later, they had moved to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood, closer to Lakeside Academy. The rent was subsidized through the Harrington Initiative's Family Support Program, designed to ensure that talented students had stable home environments conducive to practice and study. Elijah now attended Lakeside 3 days a week after school for private lessons and music theory classes. His progress had been remarkable. Even his regular school teachers had noticed improvements in his focus and confidence. And Maria's life had changed too. She still worked at Bellini's, but Mr. Vitelli had promoted her to event coordinator for their monthly music program. She now worked regular daytime hours instead of late nights, allowing her to be home with Elijah in the evenings. She had even been able to quit her second job at the diner. 5 minutes until we start, Lisa, Alexander's assistant, announced as she passed by with a clipboard. "Is Elijah ready?" "He's just warming up in the back office," Maria replied. She slipped away to check on her son. Elijah sat at Mr. Vitelli's small desk, his fingers moving silently on the surface as he practiced his piece mentally. "Almost time, buddy," Maria said softly. Elijah looked up and smiled. At 9 years old, he seemed somehow both the same and completely different from the boy he had been 6 months ago. He wore a new blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, his hair neatly combed. But the biggest change was in his eyes, the confidence that shone there, the sense of purpose. "I'm ready," he said. "I've been practicing the Chopin for weeks. Mrs. Wilson says my interpretation has really improved." Mrs. Wilson was his piano teacher at Lakeside, a stern but kind woman who had quickly recognized Elijah's natural talent and pushed him to develop his technical skills to match his intuitive understanding of the music. I know you'll be wonderful, Maria said, straightening his collar. Just remember to breathe and take your time. Elijah rolled his eyes good-naturedly. You tell me that before every performance, Mom, and I'll keep telling you until you're old and gray and playing in Carnegie Hall, she teased. They walked back into the restaurant together. The crowd had settled, and Lisa stood at the front, welcoming everyone to the 6th monthly recital of the Harrington Youth Music Initiative. Today, we're thrilled to present 5 talented young musicians from across the city, she announced. We'll begin with Thomas Lee on violin, followed by Angela Park on cello. Maria squeezed Elijah's shoulder and went to take her seat in the front row. Elijah was scheduled to perform fourth, giving him time to settle his nerves as he watched the other students. The first 3 performances were impressive. Thomas, a serious 12-year-old, played a Vivaldi piece with technical precision. Angela, only 7, charmed everyone with her enthusiasm as much as her playing. The third performer, a quiet girl named Lily, sang an aria that left the room in stunned silence before erupting in applause. Then it was Elijah's turn. Maria watched as he walked confidently to the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a moment to center himself before placing his hands on the keys. The piece he had chosen was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a challenging choice for someone his age, but one that suited his expressive style perfectly. As the first notes filled the restaurant, Maria felt her chest tighten with emotion. 6 months of proper training had refined his natural talent. His technique was more polished now, his understanding of dynamics and phrasing more sophisticated, but what still shone through was his innate feeling for the music, that rare quality that had caught Alexander Harrington's attention in the first place. Maria glanced back at Alexander during the performance. He sat completely still, his eyes closed, listening intently. When Elijah finished the piece and the applause broke out, Alexander opened his eyes, and Maria was surprised to see them glistening with tears. After the final performer, a talented pianist named David, finished his piece, Lisa invited all 5 children to come forward for a final bow. The audience gave them a standing ovation. And now, Lisa announced, Mr. Alexander Harrington would like to say a few words. A hush fell over the crowd as Alexander made his way to the front. He wasn't a man who sought the spotlight, preferring to support the Children's Foundation from behind the scenes. This was the first time he had agreed to speak at one of the recitals. Thank you all for coming today, he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the restaurant. 6 months ago, I happened to be dining in this very restaurant when I witnessed something extraordinary. A young boy playing Debussy with more feeling than many adult pianists I've heard. He gestured to Elijah, who stood a little straighter. That chance encounter reminded me of something I had forgotten, the transformative power of music in a child's life. It reminded me of my own childhood and the paths not taken. Alexander paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. The Harrington Youth Music Initiative began with 1 child, but it was never meant to end there. Today, we support 32 talented young musicians across the city, providing instruments, lessons, and whatever else they need to develop their gifts. By next year, we hope to double that number. Applause broke out, and Alexander waited for it to subside before continuing. But what I've learned these past 6 months is that it's not just about the music. It's about possibility. It's about showing these children that their dreams matter, that their talents have value. It's about changing the trajectory of a life. His eyes found Maria's in the crowd, and he smiled warmly at her. None of this would have been possible without the cooperation of Mr. Vitelli, who has generously opened his restaurant for these monthly recitals. Alexander gestured to the restaurant owner, who nodded modestly. And I want to particularly thank Maria Gonzalez, who not only coordinates these events, but whose faith in her son's talent started this whole journey. Maria felt her cheeks warm as people turned to look at her. The greatest gift we can give our children is opportunity, Alexander concluded, and I'm humbled to have been able to provide that in some small way. Thank you. As the crowd applauded, Elijah broke away from the other performers and ran to his mother, wrapping his arms around her waist. We did it, Mom, he whispered. We really did it. Maria hugged him close, remembering that night 6 months ago when she had impulsively lifted him onto the piano bench, never imagining where that simple action would lead. After the recital, as guests mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Alexander approached Maria and Elijah, That was quite a performance, young man, he said to Elijah. Chopin would have been impressed, Elijah beamed. Thank you, sir. I've been working on it for a long time. It showed. Alexander turned to Maria. And how are you? The new apartment working out well? Everything is wonderful, Maria replied sincerely. I don't know how to thank you for all you've done. Alexander shook his head. No thanks necessary. Seeing these children perform is thanks enough. He looked around the restaurant thoughtfully. 6 months ago, I came here for a business meeting. I don't even remember what it was about now, but I'll never forget looking up and seeing you lift your son to that piano. Maria smiled at the memory. I was so afraid we'd get in trouble. Instead, you started something remarkable, Alexander said. Something that's helping dozens of children now. Mom, Elijah called from across the room, where he was standing with his piano teacher. Mrs. Wilson says I'm ready to try the Bach concerto. Go, Alexander said with a chuckle. Duty calls. As Maria walked away, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The path ahead wouldn't always be easy. Elijah's talent would require years of dedication and hard work to develop fully. But for the first time, the path was clear and possible. What had begun with a simple moment, a mother lifting her son to a piano, had rippled outward to touch countless lives. And in that ordinary gesture of love, Maria had unknowingly changed their world.